Hello, friends. Welcome to Fun with English grammar. In this case, we are going to explain about the passive voice. The passive voice is used to give more prominence or importance to the object. Okay, the most important thing of the sentences in the passive voice is the object. And we all loves the pizza, okay, and knows that the eat the Italians made the pizza, okay. And in this case, I I write example. For example, the Italians is the subject, the persons create the pizza, and the pizza is the object. But when you use the passive voice, the object, in this case the pizza, becomes to the most important thing of the sentences. In this case, the pizza, okay, the object, was created by the Italians, and the Italians is the subject of the persons. Okay, this is the most easier example. But when you use the passive voice, uh, it's important. Have two important things. The first is the verb to be. The verb to be is the verb conjugate in different times. Is different that you want to use. Okay. Uh, and the second important thing is the verb in past participle. Okay. For example, the the verb of past participle in these sentences is create. Is the third form of the whatever verb. Okay. For example, wake, woke, and woken. Woken is the third form of the verb. Another example is go, went, and go. Okay, right now I explain you about use the passive voice in present simple.
Yes.
Okay, I explain you the passive voice in present simple. I have example in the board. Is a simple example. For example, mom makes hamburgers. Is sentences in present simple. Identify the mom is the subject and the hamburgers is the object. Remember, the passive voice convert the object becomes the most important thing of the sentences. So the hamburgers becomes the most important things in the sentences, and the hamburgers is made by man. Okay, remember, I in this have the structure object hamburgers. Remember, the most important things to use the passive voice is the verb to be. Remember, when you conjugate the verb, is depend to the time. In this case, present simple, and it's different the time we want to use. Okay. Then have the verb made and use the second important thing to use the passive. The verb in past participle. The make, made is the third form of the verb, and by mom, the subject becomes to the object in this case and change to the sentences. This is the present simple.
Tres.
Okay, the passive voice in past simple. And in the verb have another example, but have a irregularity and a rule from past voice, passive voice. Okay, the sentences. He ate all of the cookies. Remember, the subject and the object. Okay? In this case, cookies becomes to the most important thing of the sentences. All of the cookies were, remember, the object becomes to the new subject where is the verb to be. Remember, is the verb to different conjugate we want to use. In this case, past simple. So use were and have the verb and the verb in past participle. Remember the most important things to write the sentences in passive voice. And when you have a question, in this case, the subject disappear the subject. Okay, and I explain you in Spanish. The sentences say él comió todas las galletas, and I explain you it's not necessary to use the subject because the most important thing is the object. Okay, and in the sentences in passive voice in Spanish heard todas las galletas fueron comidas. Okay, it's not necessary to use the subject because you have the concept of the sentences, and is the similar structure of the present simple and past simple, but the difference is verb to be only, but is similar. Okay,
3,
now I explain you about the passive voice but in present progressive. In this case, have the example. He is fixing my computer. You identify the subject, the verb, and the object. Remember, identify the subject, verb, the object. The object becomes the most important thing of the sentences. In this case, my computer, and the difference to the another times is in present progressive is being. In Spanish say está haciendo, but it's the change of the different times, and you remember the first most important thing is the verb to be, and use in this case is being. And fixed is the verb in the first sentence in active voice, and fixed is the verb in past participle, and you remember it's not necessary to use the subject because the most important thing is the object. In Spanish say él está arreglando mi computadora, and when you use the passive voice it's not necessary to use the subject. Mi computadora está siendo arreglada.
3,
Okay, now explain the difference active voice versus passive voice. Okay, in this case have the principle. The first subject do the action to express in active voice, and remember in passive voice the subject receives the action. Okay, becomes to the complement of the sentences. The second is the focus stay in subject. The principal focus stay in the subject. In this case, have a question is in the sentences is who did or make the bed, who cook dinner. Okay, and in passive voice the difference is the focus stay in the object. Okay, it's not important to who did the action, it's important to who received the action. Okay, the object. And And finally, the verb in active voice, the verb conjugate in whatever time. You have a grammatical rules, but you conjugate in whatever time. And in passive voice, you have a principal rule. The principal verb have changes. The auxiliary plus to be plus the verb in past participle. This is important. And to the principal verb that I explained you. Okay. Thank you. This is the class to the three principal sentences in active in passive voice. Okay. In present simple, simple past, and present progressive. Thank you.